Cheers! Welcome to Movie Bitches. Ooh, that ding was good.
It was good.
It really.
Ooh.
Oh, that one wasn't as good.
No.
Oh well.
As you might have heard, we are drinking wine.
Yes. Shout out to our wine sponsor, Wink. Try wink.com/moviebitches. You get $22 off your first month of wine.
We're here at Sundance on location.
Yes, we're at the Sundance TV headquarters, where they have graciously invited us back to record a podcast. We were very excited to get our press credentials this year for the Sundance Film Festival.
Yes, I'm so excited. We got tickets. We get to, have passes and everything. It's very exciting.
Yeah, we feel like big shots. We got invited to all the parties and everything. Like, oh yeah, thanks. I don't have to sneak my way in. Great.
And every time someone looks at our badge, they laugh because it says Movie Bitches on it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a true story. It's kind of like, were you there at Toronto when I used my badge? And he was like, okay, thanks, Movie Bitches. And then they were like, oh, that was on their badge. That's what their name is. I didn't call them a badge. Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh, sorry.
I'm so nice and Canadian. Oh.
But back to Sundance.
Yes.
So we are here in Park City, and it's been snowy, but not too bad.
Yeah.
The first year that we came, it was like a full-on blizzard the entire time, and I lost our car keys in the snow. And
I did not know you were going to tell this story.
I mean, why not? Luckily, we had to call AAA.
Car keys.
Yeah, the rental car keys. It's a good thing. It's the only time I've ever used the damage waiver, and it's also the only time I've ever signed up for it. But I did it because you convinced me. You're like, oh, I don't know, it's snowy and stuff. Hey. And it was definitely worth it.
Oh, yeah, because not only did we have to get the car towed, but it was parked in an underground garage, so we had to get a special tow truck that tows cars from underground garages.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was fun. But this year's been very relaxing
very
exciting,
relaxed.
So we thought we'd talk about the movies that we've seen and some of the stuff we've been doing, and just give you a rundown on our Sundance 2020.
Boo, boo. Well, oh my God, should we talk about the intro video? So, I mean, a lot of you may not have been to a film festival, but they always have like a little lead-in video. And the Sundance ones change every year with the theme. And one year it was like these horrific horror wind chimes. I felt like we were about to get murdered in the woods. One year it was these weird like arrows going each way.
It's like a little short art piece. What do you call it? Like a little graphic intro.
Yeah.
Almost like a logo for a studio or something.
Exactly.
But it
a little
changes
longer.
every year.
Yeah, and then it's like, thanks to all our sponsors, blah, blah, blah. But this year, it's like, I feel like they almost need an epilepsy warning. It's a lot of like, pow, cha, coo, shapes, colors, break, flashing. Facts are fags.
I was just waiting to see if you were going to mention the band name that we thought of.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, absolutely. So I will say also this year's logo, I don't know if we have anything that has it on it. This only has half the logo. We can put it up. I said it looked like an anus. And then someone else said, no, because it's like too filled in the center. It looks like a gaping anus. And then we thought that would be kind of a fabulous like rock band name. Like
punk rock. I want an all-girl punk rock band named Gaping Asshole. Oh. That's too much.
I think gaping asshole's too much.
We've gone too far. But anyway, back to the movies, because that's really what we're here for.
Yeah.
So the first movie that we saw was called Nowhere In.
Yeah, speaking of bands.
Right, with St. Vincent and Carrie Brownstein, who I guess are best friends in real life. I didn't realize.
Is Carrie Brownstein someone?
She's the chick from Portlandia.
Oh, right.
And she's in, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name of her band. Skinny Kitten. Oh, boy. Oh, I'm so sorry. I used to know it, and it's gone. She's in a very well-known and touted band.
Well, so this is perfect then.
Yes.
A segue to talking about female bands. That makes so much more sense now.
Did you not know?
About this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I thought she was actually like not the director, but like, you know what I mean?
Oh, right.
Like,
so Nowhere In is like a
mockumentary?
rock mockumentary, surreal breakdown of traditional documentary, but also like with skits in between.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, basically they explained later on in the Q&A that it started off as like, ooh, let's just film us on tour and it'll be like a tour video and that'll be fun. And they were like, maybe this isn't so fun. And so then they were like, let's toss in some skits and some like, bigger picture things that'll
skits in between the
color it up.
Numbers.
Exactly. And then I guess it kind of took on a little bit of a life of its own. I don't know if the director, I don't remember his name.
It started with a B. I feel like it was Bill something.
sorry to this man. I don't know.
It may have even been alliterative. It may have been a BB.
Ooh.
It seemed like they were flying by the seat of their pants a bit.
Yes.
They have a lot of ideas. They're very creative people. I enjoyed watching them be creative, but it didn't feel like a cohesive, like there was someone who was steering the helm and just really knew what was going to happen. It felt like they found a lot of it in the editing room, which happens, and sometimes it works out great. I think if you love St. Vincent, which I do, I really...
She seems pretty cool, not gonna lie.
But if you love her music, like...
Sure.
So they talk about how her fans are so emotionally invested in her, and this girl comes back and talks to her backstage and has a complete meltdown and cries and all these things, and that's very true.
Was that real?
Regardless of whether it was actually like a true fan that was crying, every person I know that loves St. Vincent loves Saint. Like they are like, she is my life.
Got
I like
you.
it is a thing.
It's
like
intense.
people are very intense and connected to her.
Okay.
And I understand that because she has a very strong aesthetic. Her music is very effective. And so that was kind of a funny, for me at least, I was like, oh yeah, I've met those people.
I mean, it definitely at least seemed like something that has happened.
Yes.
That they perhaps then played upon. You know, it was like, ooh, let's jazz this up, or let's. I actually wish that they had done a little bit more, I guess, like hyperbole. If they'd pushed it to 11. Speaking of rock band mockumentaries, but like, it wasn't that.
No, it wasn't interested in being overtly funny. It was funny at times.
Yeah.
But it was more surreal. It was very much more like the breakdown of friendships and female friendships and filmmaking and what does it mean and what's real and what's not real and these personas we're putting on for, you know, to be a person.
Yes. It was very meta.
Different. So it was more interested in doing that than being a mockumentary, you know, but it could have leaned one way or the other for me.
Even if it kept the surrealism, I just wanted the surrealism to be more.
Even more weird.
Because it was this weird mixture of like, oh, for a lot of it was just us filming her on tour. And then we decided that wasn't enough. And it's like if they had gone into...
It's evident in the film that they started with one idea and then ended up with a different idea. Yes, that is evident.
So I wouldn't say like, oh, don't watch it, but...
I think there is an audience for this movie.
Yeah.
I didn't love it, but I found it interesting. Yeah. And I love St. Vincent. And
she
her
seems great. Oh my God,
outfits are fantastic. And her sunglasses throughout the film.
Yeah, I asked in the Q&A, what was it? It was called...
Crap brand sunglasses. And I was like, yes. I really am appreciating that every time, well, it turns out that every time we ask a question at the Q&A, it generally has to do with the fashion.
Yeah.
And people have gotten better at being like, oh, it was this brand.
Sure.
Or like, oh, I owned that and found it at a thrift store. And
sure. Or like, oh, this is the costume designer and isn't she fabulous? And you're like, yes, she is.
I always try
to
applaud the costume designers. Yes, for sure. This is some ASMR right up in here.
Okay, sorry.
It starts and it's very much like Carrie Brownstein playing herself and St. Vincent playing herself, and she asks her to make, you know, a documentary about her on tour, and it starts as like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we work together because we're friends and all of that, but a lot of it devolves into like that weird thing between women where they manipulate each other by undermining their self-confidence.
You're really boring, though.
Yeah, so like a lot of it was Carrie Brownstein. I mean, and this is on purpose and it's absolutely commenting on this, but it was Carrie Brownstein being like, St. Vincent, can you be more, or Annie rather, her real name, can you be more interesting? Like it's kind of too boring. You're talking, but I loved it. I thought she was fascinating.
I really liked the dynamic that they had with them. And that was kind of one of the things where it added to the surrealism, but also the comedy.
Yes.
Where you're like, well, this is crazy, but also this is crazy. You know, like, I don't know.
Right.
But you could also laugh along with it because you were like, well, they're doing it up, but also it's true. It was funny because it's true.
It was a lot of that. Yeah. A lot of talk about radishes and tasting the dirt. And the
that
earth.
Was very Portlandia.
It was very Portlandia, but like that was very true to me, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And just, it was a lot about the persona and how, you know, well, who is she outside of St. Vincent? Well, she has to exercise a lot and keep in shape, and she eats right, and like there's a lot of work put into being St. Vincent.
Yes.
And that translated to some people as boring. Or whatever, you know, like she's not this rocker, crazy, I'm getting drunk, I'm having parties person or whatever. But we didn't talk about Dakota Johnson.
Oh my God. I think in my favorite role of hers,
yes,
Dakota Johnson shows up as her girlfriend.
Yes.
Which then we went down a real Wikipedia rabbit hole.
There was a lot of conflicting articles about St. Vincent having dated Cara Delevingne, and apparently Cara Delevingne and Dakota Johnson are best friends. So then I was like, oh, but Cara Delevingne and her have subsequently broken up.
Right.
So I was like, oh, did they film this before they broke up? And Dakota Johnson was doing.
Like, oh, wouldn't that be funny?
Oh, it would be so fun if I played her girlfriend. There was a lot going on. It seems like there's a lot going on.
Sure.
And I'm not sure, but yes, Dakota Johnson shows up out of nowhere to just be in lingerie with her and have Carrie Brownstein film them. Make
the
it out.
Incestuous web of,
Celebrity.
supermodel, celebrity, fluidly sexual women.
Yes, all of it. The movie ended, and it was definitely a lot to take in. It was like, whoa, what was going on? And then Carrie Brownstein and St. Vincent were there in person, and it seemed like, at least for St. Vincent, it was definitely the first time she had seen any of it, maybe, together. And she just comes up and goes, well, that was a horrifying experience. That was terrible.
That was awful. And it was funny because, like, she definitely presented it like, she was Adam Driver and I can't watch myself, But it was also a little bit like, well, that was objectively bad.
Yeah, like I'm not sure because she says at some point, like, our hubris really got the best of us. And I was like, I think maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. But maybe that was also part of it. I don't know.
What is real? What's the persona?
They definitely were playing with and blending the lines of, like, who is she and what is the persona and how much of this is put on and how much so I enjoyed that. Yes. Like, it was almost like additive to the experience.
Kept going on.
Yeah.
And I did want to just mention Carrie Brownstein's high-waisted, obviously, like, perfectly tailored to her body leather jodhpurs that were amazing.
I don't know how I missed those, but
they were amazing.
Good.
Just thought I'd mention it.
Well, speaking of weird movies.
We are at Sundance.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, that is, I do tend to go for the weird ones at Sundance where you're like, I might never see this movie ever again.
This might never see the light of day.
Exactly.
Although we thought that about Escape from Tomorrowland, and it's like on Amazon, so.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
If you want to watch something really weird that's not good and is annoying.
But weird,
watch a movie called Escape from Tomorrowland.
I think Disney was actually smart. So, sidebar for Escape from Tomorrowland. It all was shot guerrilla style at Disney World and Disneyland, completely without permits and all of the above.
It was just like, oh, we're on vacation, but it was fake. It was
and I think instead of suing them and making it a big deal and giving the movie publicity, I think Disney was like, it's bad anyway, so no one will care.
No one will care.
And no one did.
Nope. It was really smart. Yeah, because if they sued them,
it'd be a huge thing.
Huge thing. And everyone would be like, I have to watch this movie and make the value 10 times as much. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, what weird movie did you want to talk about?
So the weird movie this year at Sundance, for me at least, was called Kajillionaire.
Oh, right. I have not seen this.
No. Okay. So I actually didn't see it here. I saw an earlier screening, and I don't know how much it's changed.
Okay.
So because it was weird, and then the people that I've heard talk about it here really liked it. Now, I won't say that I didn't like it, because actually by the end of the movie, I was kind of like, that was weird, but I think I liked it. Evan Rachel Wood, Gina Rodriguez shows up later. It really it picks up when she shows up.
That's so weird. I just, sidebar, started watching the Carmen Sandiego reboot cartoon on Netflix.
Oh, yeah. How is it?
It's cute.
Okay. Like, is she in it? Is that what's happening?
She's the voice of...
Gotcha.
Sorry, she's the voice of Carmen Sandiego. It's, like, super cute.
Love it.
It's like a cartoon, but like it's for children.
Well, sure.
But I was like, yes.
I mean, so was Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, absolutely. But I was a child when I was watching that.
Well, right.
But like as an adult, I can appreciate that it's like
this is
cute, well written. Like the cartoon looks cool. Like she's rad.
Love it.
Into it.
Yeah.
There's hats. It's great.
Well, there better be a freaking hat. It's Carmen Sandiego.
It's Carmen Sandiego.
She just had a goddamn red hat.
But they didn't bring back the a cappella group.
I don't remember that.
Remember they sang the song. They opened it up.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Well, she sneaks around the world from here to Carolina.
I didn't know that was like an a cappella group, but I guess
it's like a barbershop quartet.
Yeah, sure. Anyway.
So
Kajillionaire. Evan Rachel Wood, Gina Rodriguez, Deborah Winger.
Love her.
Yeah,
I'm so glad she's back.
I know. Isn't that crazy? I forget. I was just talking to someone and we were looking through a movie and it was like, oh, Deborah Winger. We're like, oh, right.
It was Rachel getting married.
Oh, that's right. We were just looking that up and it was like, oh, right. Deborah Winger came back. Yeah. So here she is. Weird.
Love it.
Yeah. And Richard Jenkins. But so it's about... So there's a couple that recruits Evan Rachel Wood to they want to do like a big heist, but they also live in like this weird foam factory. It was like a lot of just like kind of surrealist weirdness. And in all honesty, a lot of it is like jumbled in my brain. So I'm not doing a great job talking about it.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
But that's how I felt for most of the movie. So like that's part of the problem where I'm just like, but what's happening here? But by the end,
is Evan Rachel Wood like a
great in it?
But sure,
well, I mean, I don't always love her. So to me, that is
true.
I was like, oh, like that was a good performance from her. Just the two.
Is Evan Rachel Wood like a good cat burglar or something? Why
She's
did
like
they hire her?
She's like a hustler child.
Okay.
I mean, she's obviously not a child.
Right.
But she's
been hustling
she
since...
seems like she's a child, if that makes sense.
Okay.
She's like...
I mean, I'm intrigued.
Am I misremembering this? I feel like it's right that she was like a child. Like there was this thing where they would always go steal stuff from the post office. I don't remember. It's a blur in my head. I'm not gonna lie.
Were you sober for the viewing of this film?
I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure. Okay.
It was a while. It was the thing is that I saw it like maybe 6 months ago. Oh. So it was like a while ago that I saw it.
Okay.
And then it was like, oh, and then it's at Sundance, and I was like, oh, that weird movie that I watched.
Oh, it probably changed a bit. Though.
I think it must have. I think they've refined it.
Right.
Because there was a lot of weird, cool things there
Uh-huh.
that I was like I said, by the end, I was like, oh, I think I kind of liked that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't great.
It could
was
use
just
a little
like,
massaging.
Yeah, so perhaps they massaged it.
Cool.
I would be willing to rewatch. It just didn't work with their schedule.
So, like, the aesthetic, like, the director seems like someone to watch.
Yes,
obviously,
yes,
right?
yes, I think so.
Cool. Should we talk about the Glorias?
I would love to talk about the Glorias.
So we got the schedule for this year's Sundance, and I immediately saw that Julie Taymor had a new movie, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. We have to get tickets. This is #1. I want to see it. She hasn't made a movie since Across the Universe, I think.
Really?
I think so.
No, I thought they listed another one, and I was like, oh, right, she did that, but whatever.
But, like, timeline-wise, I don't think she's done one since.
Either way, whatever. It's been a while.
It's been a minute.
And I was very excited. So she directed a movie called The Glorias about Gloria Steinem.
Yes.
And I really loved it.
I thought it was great. I love Julie. No one makes movies like Julie Taymor. They're very weird, but in a very specifically Julie Taymor kind of way.
Absolutely. However, I will say that this is one of the more tame ones.
Very much that.
I liked that. It was more commercial. It was more like,
right.
the storyline, the storytelling is clear, but a little weird.
I think it was important with this story it didn't need to go to a completely creatively surrealistic place. Like with Frida, there's room to just, that is so...
and you have to say, with Frida.
With Frida. You can just do whatever you want with that kind of, with the visuals.
Well, especially because Frida, her art was
so like there's more room to play.
Yeah.
And with, like, she did a really great version of Titus Andronicus. And it's Shakespeare, so you can do whatever, you can go there and do it. But with this, I think it was important to keep somewhat in reality because it is about a real person. It is about real events. And you want to keep it interesting, but not be so weird that you're like, well, that probably wasn't true. So
right.
I'm going to write this off as like a fantasy.
Right. No, there were 2 scenes, I would say, that were fully like surrealist fantasy, but that were used really artistically to represent emotions.
And had nothing to do with facts or narrative.
No. It was all about let's find a way to represent
something.
these emotions at this experience.
Exactly.
That we were watching basically a filmed version of.
Yes.
Which was kind of cool.
I thought it did a really great job of mixing media.
Yes.
It has old news footage. It has, footage from the March on Washington that they interspersed with footage that they had shot.
Yeah, it would be like, oh, and now she's watching it on a monitor or whatever. And like they would find a cool way to integrate it. But then also, like, they would recast people for some of the roles.
It did a good job of mixing it all together. Sometimes I find that jarring.
Yeah.
And because it is a Julie Taymor movie, like, you kind of go, oh, okay, I'm along for this creative ride.
Yeah.
But I also really loved how it handled the biopicness of it.
Yes.
It was so interesting. So it's the Glorias because it's different ages of this one person, and it's all represented in her riding on this bus with herself, essentially. Right. And she'll have conversations with her older self and her younger self and sort of checking back in. And I think that's so healthy as a person to do that and
Absolutely.
to talk to your younger self and kind of go, oh, how did I feel about that? And
Well,
then it did a really good job of representing that.
I agree. And I felt like that narrative structure it felt like it was someone's autobiography almost, where it was like if Gloria Steinem were today looking back and perhaps they had lengthy conversations about it.
Well, and I haven't read her book.
No.
But it could be very true that the book is written this way. I have no idea.
I mean, I certainly want to read the book after watching the movie.
Yeah.
The book's called On the Road, and it's all about how she's traveled all over the world, and especially the United States. The bus metaphor obviously makes sense.
Yes.
And also then this retrospective kind of like, oh, look at how I've changed and the things that were important to me at that age or at this age or what I thought was going to happen and didn't or whatever.
Well, and so interesting for a woman who grew up in the 50s to then look back at herself and say, oh, what were my priorities back then? Well, I wanted to get married and have kids and be a dancer, but then retire.
Right. And a Cadillac convertible for my husband. Well, I guess I could take the Cadillac convertible.
Right.
And he can have
want
the
this
station
kind
wagon.
of dog and all of that stuff and what your priorities were, and not that that's wrong in any way, but just how you evolve over time and how she evolved as a woman and empowered herself as a woman was fascinating. I thought that was such a great way of representing that.
This is honestly one of the most inspiring movies that I've seen in a very long time, particularly when it comes
and hopeful.
to exactly hopeful and inspiring when it comes particularly to politics and like women's rights and equality, and not just women's rights, really. It was more
just equal rights for all.
Exactly. In this day and time, it was like really just like chicken soup for the
soul.
The
Remember
wary
those
millennial
books?
soul. Yes,
Remember
I do
those
remember
books?
those books. I loved those. I mean, I was a little sensitive gay boy, so of course I did. But
that was like, oh, what should we do on our sleepover? Like, we already watched The Craft and Hocus Pocus. Like, but we're not ready to go to bed. Should we read some Chicken Soup for the Soul together? Oh my God, I'm so moved.
Oh my God.
Okay, let's go to bed.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But yes, the Glorias, starring Julianne Moore, plays the oldest Gloria.
Yep.
And although Gloria Steinem does actually show up at the very end.
At the very, very end. Julianne Moore, it was interesting. Julianne Moore was the only one that they really aged.
With makeup, yes.
With makeup.
Yes.
She plays like 2 levels of older Gloria.
And Alicia Vikander plays young, middle to young age, Gloria Steinem. And I actually think this is my favorite performance of hers.
I think I only know her in the
Lighthouse?
I forgot she was in the Lighthouse.
I mean, not the Lighthouse.
No, in Light Between
Oceans.
No, what was the other one with Eddie Redmayne?
Danish Girl.
Oh, right, Danish Girl. Yeah. So 2 movies I know her in.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely preferred her in this, although except for...
Oh my gosh. Well, I thought she was actually really fantastic and fabulous, but at a certain point, I don't know, maybe an hour 15 in, her sort of Ohioan accent that she was going for went real, like it seemed like these were the first 5 days that they filmed, and she hadn't figured out the accent yet because she went real Kermit the Frog with it.
It was like Kermit the Frog meets Katharine Hepburn. It was like this weird mid-Atlantic Kermit the Frog. Where are we going? It was weird.
It was so jarringly like, what? Like I was like, I turned to Andrew and just went, what has happened?
It really made it hard for me to take those scenes seriously.
I honestly think they should cut them. Like it was that
jarring. I agree.
And I was trying, I was like doing calculations in the film, like, okay, now if they cut those scenes, would it have, affected things?
Or could they like ADR it?
Or something, because it was
like maybe they dub it.
I think they should.
I think they could probably get away with dubbing. Like,
it was really just like 2-3 short scenes.
Yeah.
And one of them was like montaged.
So you could really just like, let's redo that voiceover.
It was aggressive. And I think it didn't help that it was like her last scenes that we saw, like timeline in the movie wise. Like she had all these great scenes where I was like, oh yes, she's fantastic. Yeah. I've seen an hour of her acting, amazing. And then all of a sudden it was, oh no. And then we never saw her.
And then it's like, now Julianne Moore's taking over. So
it was like, I got this. Yeah. I was like, okay, good.
Tap you out.
But I do want to talk about, it was interesting. So all of the male characters are completely secondary except for her father.
Sure.
Played by Timothy Hutton.
Yeah.
Who I, love. He's great.
He was great.
I really thought he brought like a life and a lightness to it, and he was some combination of like Teller from Penn and Teller and like Tom Waits. Like he was this quirky kind of guy, and
his performance kind of reminded me of Big Fish.
Yes, it was very that.
In that like kind of like, oh, it's
Albert
a little surreal.
Finney,
it
was a little Tim Burton-y, just a little weird.
It really helped inform the character as we see this girl grow up with her dad. He brought so much like light and life and
fun and
optimism
energy and
into her
optimism
life.
and hope.
Yes. And so that was really interesting to see.
Well, it was interesting. So then her mother is mentally ill, has a lot of depression and anxiety, and we don't get into it fully, why or what, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see the two sides of it and how she experienced this like hopeful joy and this sort of depressing reality, and how that kind of informed her as well. Like it's two things together. Yeah.
Well, I think her mom kind of they at least set this up that like the mom seemed to have to take the grounding role because her dad was constantly
the
dreaming
bad cop.
in a fight. Exactly. And at a certain point that took a toll. But then I also thought they really did a lovely job of the narrative of like her mom was a writer under a male pseudonym because women weren't allowed to write at the time. I thought that was interesting. She's telling her daughter, "Oh, well, could you imagine what it was, you know?"
Oh yeah,
and
that's how it was done back then.
Exactly.
Like, men, you know,
but
a woman couldn't have her name on an article.
No, and so it was interesting to see how like that progressed, and then to see their relationship of once she starts to be a journalist and have her own byline, and the mom was so proud. That was really touching, and I thought that was also indicative of like the progress that had been made before Gloria.
Yes.
That she then, continued and carried the torch for this now period of time.
The generations of...
And is inspiring someone else to keep
pushing,
moving.
just keep going.
Exactly. Push that boulder over the ledge.
We got this. Yeah. We're Sisyphus. We got it.
Exactly.
So one of the more surreal scenes... I love this. This was so amazing. Right. So it's taken from what I'm assuming is a real interview.
I'm sure it was a real interview.
With some man.
Yeah.
And Gloria Steinem. And he is being very misogynistic and gross.
It's full-on sexual harassment.
Oh, 100%. It was like very gross. And it's on live TV.
Yeah.
You dress very sexy. What do you what do you think if I told you that you're like a very attractive sex object or whatever? And she handles it with grace. But they go into this whole, I don't know how to describe it, like straight male panic purgatory hell. It was so amazing. Yeah. She kind of calls him out.
Well, it was fun too. This was kind of fun where she would switch, where like one of the characters could be there and deal with an asshole. And then,
where like older Julianne Moore, Gloria Steinem would show up in a scene where Alicia Vikander had previously been and had not said anything and stood up for herself, but Julianne Moore could stand up for herself. And there was a lot of that messing with time and all of that. And I
like this is what I wish I had said with me now. Like, I now wish I had been like, no, you asshole, you can go fuck yourself. That is sexual. I mean, but like
she said it a little more.
Well, it was much more. Yes. But there was like this whole, the witchery.
Well, so it's like red tornado of hell and panic and women who are
Wizard of Oz. I mean, it really
there was literally there was literally like a witch and her showing up dressed sexy and then dressed like a nun and then dressed like all of the just like panic induced like the flying nun.
Yeah, because it was the same.
Sally Field.
Yeah.
Gidget is different.
But
both played by Sally Field, but different characters.
Yes.
It's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, just this sort of like panic-induced like male. It was so good. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought that was great. Yeah. It was almost like Spooky Mormon Hell from Book of Mormon. Have you seen Book of Mormon?
Yes.
When it's like Spooky Mormon and people are dressed like coffee and like they're in long underwear and
I
stuff.
vaguely remember that.
Anyway, it was fun.
But speaking of fabulous women, like coming for men, I think what also was really cool about this film was that it wasn't just about Gloria.
Right.
It was about all of these other women that she was working alongside. I thought it did a great job of highlighting and Gloria talked about this in the Q&A. She was the minority of these women, that it was actually people of color that were
women
the
of color
majority
have
of women
always
fighting
been,
back and leading the charge. And I thought that was really fascinating. I thought that it was really cool that this movie took the time to focus on a lot of them in different ways. And
I think Gloria Steinem wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh, absolutely not.
I think she is so open about all the women that inspired her. The title, The Glorias, represents, the different stages of Gloria, but also just as a whole, like the women in general that like are holding up these torches and fighting against. But we got introduced to these women that I had never heard of, and Julie Taymor herself had mentioned that like I didn't know. I'm a fairly political person who's like educated, but I had no idea who these women were.
And we posted that to our Instagram, so make sure to go and follow us on Instagram. And we have little Sundance highlights that you can check out too.
Yes. But Flo Kennedy, who
oh my God,
is basically doing like stand-up for women's rights. It was so fabulous. She was amazing. She really brought like energy and life to it.
Absolutely.
And Wilma Mankiller, who was the first elected chief of her tribe, it just like
female elected chief.
Of course. Bette Midler shows up.
Oh my God. How would we not talk about Bette Midler yet? I can't believe.
And her hats.
Oh my God.
As Bella Abzug.
We get introduced to her as she's running for office.
Yeah.
And she's just so fabulous.
Oh, when she showed up, I squealed.
Yeah, we absolutely. Avaryl and I literally were just like, oh my God, it's Bette.
And she has a matching hat for every suit that she's wearing. I mean, it was really good. So what I really appreciated was Julie Taymor. The big thing for me with biopics is when they change things that are fact.
Right.
And Julie Taymor was really dedicated to, while some things might narratively work better at a different time or place, the feeling had to be right and
the
correct.
Facts had to
and
be
the facts had to be correct. And I felt like I trusted her to tell this story.
Absolutely.
Where it reminded me a lot of thinking about Rocket Man, where it presented itself as a biopic.
Right.
Sure, it had like sort of magical realism within the music, but it presented itself as fact.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of things in that movie that were just completely false. Like, I named myself Elton John after John Lennon. That's absolutely untrue. He named himself after a different man named John. And so...
Or I went to group therapy.
Oh, sure. That's a little less egregious.
Sure.
As,
I guess
he still went to therapy.
Sure. And you could say that in some ways, perhaps the group therapy conceit is similar to the bus conceit.
Yes. But I didn't feel like I trusted.
Successful.
It was less successful. And I didn't feel like I trusted those filmmakers to tell me the truth about what was going on. So anyway, I felt like I trusted Julie Taymor with this. And that was evident in the Q&A afterwards when she explained all of her reasoning.
She said basically there were only two things that weren't absolutely factually accurate. And one of them was just that like the conversation that took place didn't take place where they said it did in the movie.
Yes.
And she's like, well, I asked Gloria, and she was like, well, let me ask
the other woman.
The other woman.
I forget her name, but she was
great too. She was like a unionizer for
farm workers.
Yes. Which was really cool. And she was like, and she said yes, so it was fine.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's cool.
And Julie Taymor talked about like doing a biopic about someone who's still alive.
Right.
Was obviously helpful to be like, is this true? Like, how would you represent this? So it seemed like a real collaboration.
Absolutely.
And I would highly recommend it for all ages.
Well, and I really liked too what I didn't realize, and I don't know how I didn't even realize this, but like what I liked was that at the end, because she is still alive, it catches up with her. And we see her in her apartment writing about the election, about current affairs, about...
At the Women's March.
At the Women's March. I thought this was really cool, too. She said in the Q&A, she had lots of great sayings that were both in the movie and in the Q&A.
Yes.
But one of them, she was like, for us older women, this actually movement now is giving us hope because there's hope that we can keep going. And we've seen it worse. She said.
Oh, yes.
And for the young people, they are mad as hell. And so
they're
like, it's a good
pissed.
Yeah,
so
it's
together
a good
we'll get through it.
Yeah.
Well, and she says in her speech at the Women's March, this was stuck with me, was the Constitution does not start with I, the president, it starts with we, the people. And I was like, oh, that's so good.
Yeah, it really was.
I was
we haven't even talked about really that she's a writer first and foremost.
Yes.
And I think that was well handled, but also then like kind of celebrated because her writing is really great. And that's where I was like, I really want to read this book.
Yes, everyone should see it. Someone said in the Q&A, like, this should be taught in schools. They should show, and I was like, yes. Yeah.
Well, and I thought that was cool too. The woman, the Q&A was like, oh, this should be taught in schools. Every girl should see this, and Gloria,
every young girl should see this.
Yeah, and Gloria goes, yes, and every young man. And I was like, you know what? Yes.
I think Julie Taymor said that.
Maybe she did, but either way, both of them are right.
100%.
Highly recommend
it. Love it.
So speaking of politics, one that I saw, a documentary called Boys State that sold for a record $12 million to Apple.
Oh, a record documentary.
Documentary sale.
We'll talk about a different record later.
Yes, we will. So I did not find this to be optimistic or inspiring. I don't know. I know so many people really loved it.
So I haven't
April hasn't seen it. I did not particularly care for it. It's interesting. So the premise is it's the documentary following a handful of boys in Texas.
Adolescents, right?
Yes, they're like 17 or 18.
Okay.
And they're like in senior year, summer before senior year kind of age range, whatever.
Okay.
And they set it up. There's apparently been for decades and decades, never heard of it. There's in multiple states. It's not just like Texas.
Okay.
It's all over the country. There's boy state and girl state. They're still separated. And already I was like, well, this is fucked. And also, why are we just focusing on Boys State.
That was my question. So you briefly told me about it, and I was like, why aren't we making a documentary about both of them?
I would particularly like to see the differences between Boys State, which was super bro-y, super like, whoa, 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 you know, like it was just like, oh, it made me cringe.
Yeah.
It just, whenever you get a group of 1,000 boys chanting political nonsense, like, and a lot of the politics ranged, which was interesting.
Sure.
You know, it was not just like, it's Texas and everyone, I mean, there was a lot of talk about guns, but there was very clearly, if not sometimes out homosexuals.
Great.
And there was talk about LGBTQ rights and like all sorts of stuff. And there was actually, what was inspiring was that even though there was a lot of conservative viewpoints, among these kids, it was a lot of like, well, of course that's just a given that's on the platform, like that it should be LGBT, like equal rights.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's refreshing at least.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. But
maybe those young boys are gonna go watch Gloria.
Maybe
the Glorias.
Maybe
rather.
some of them will. Some of them maybe at least. But it was crazy. So it starts off and it's showing over the credits all of these famous politicians.
Oh, like politicians that had been in Boys State and then become politicians. Got it.
Like Cory Booker. I kind of found it intriguing.
Okay.
But also like Rush Limbaugh. So
great.
You have like different sides and you know, it was like, oh. But I think that is also kind of interesting. Obviously.
Well, and you want to talk about both sides.
Yes.
You know, it's important.
Yes, it is. What was weird to me was that the way that it works is that they're randomly separated into nationalists and federalists. And so the documentary follows, you know, kind of the people that rose to the top of each party.
Because it's kind of like debate club /
Model
we're
UN.
Playing Model UN.
Kind of thing, exactly. So there's elections. People get elected to...
Who are the voters? The other boys?
The other people either... Well, so eventually there's an election for like the governor of Boys State. And that's where like they need to get the votes not just of their party, but of the other party as well in order to win.
Okay.
What was weird to me was that because they're randomly separated, the platform is not...
what they personally believe.
No.
Right.
And so they're running off of how can I politically game this system to get the most votes.
It's like teaching them how to...
be disgusting politicians.
Yeah, game the system of politics.
And that was what for me was the most icky, where I really left feeling so uninspired, but rather like icked out, where I was just like, well, why are we teaching people not how to properly and successfully argue their ideals and their platform, but rather to compromise everything in order to get power?
Gross.
Yeah.
Does the documentary comment on how that's gross?
No.
Oh, that's
not
gross.
really.
That's gross.
Yeah. So that's what for me was really the most icky about it.
So it's a pass for you.
For me, it was a full pass. I was like, ooh, Apple, that was a mistake. $12 million.
They've got it.
No, they have billions.
They've got it. They've got it.
Nonsense.
Yeah. Oh, well, so talking about documentaries.
Sure.
We also saw a documentary called The Truffle Hunters?
Yes.
The Truffle Hunters, which seemed really promising.
Oh, I saw this on the program. I was like, yes, please. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's about Italians, old men, dogs, and truffles. I'm in.
Hunting for truffles in the wilds of, where were they? Sao Paulo?
San Benedicto or something like that. I forget exactly.
I forget exactly.
It's in Piedmont region of Italy, where truffles are well known. Alba.
Right.
The white Alba truffle.
So it's gorgeously photographed. Every shot is framed really interestingly, and there's bright colors, and it started, and I was really interested, and we're introducing all of these older Italian men who, it doesn't seem like it's anyone's main job. It's somewhat a hobby.
Yeah, it seems...
it's income, but it's not like their job.
No.
For fun.
I don't think they have a job. They're all retired. I mean, some of them were 87 years old or older.
They've been doing it forever. But they, for the adventure of it all, they go out into the woods, and they have dogs that are like their, best friends that they search for truffles, and the dogs find them, and they dig them up, and they sell them. And it's like this sort of... scavenger hunt, treasure hunt almost.
Sure.
It's rare. It's hard to find them. It's like very exciting when they find one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they really...
This is in my, reading the description, I'm like, oh, that seems so fun.
Sure.
But then you see the documentary, and it's very slow.
Yep, very slow.
Not very informative.
No.
I realized, thinking about it, there's no text.
No.
On the screen, because it's a foreign language film for us.
It's all in Italian.
It's all in Italian, so there was no here's a title card just to give you a little info about truffles or this or
beyond
that.
What really frustrated me was that there was no interviews.
There's no interviews. It was very cinema verite, but the hard thing with that is that everything was shot so meticulous. Everything was framed and so meticulously shot, like it was like a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
So that seems very calculated.
Right.
And yet it's supposed to be this fly on the wall.
Yeah.
We're just observing.
It's like, here's this gorgeous frame that clearly took time to set up.
A long time.
They had to set these frames up. Now talk to your dog and tell her how much you love her. And I'm like, what's happening here though? But then they wouldn't talk to them and ask them questions of like, well, tell us about your dog.
How long have you been truffle hunting?
Why do you care about truffle hunting? We don't know. I mean, I had to Google it afterward, how truffles
form
or what they really are. I mean, I've eaten them. I don't know what it really was. I had to look it up. It didn't tell us. It didn't tell us how they hunt them or why they have to hunt them, why they use dogs, because apparently in Italy they used to use pigs until recently.
Because I always thought it was,
truffle pigs.
Truffle pigs.
Yeah. So anyway, I learned all of this from Wikipedia and none of it from this movie.
Right.
And I was just like, well, that seems like a missed opportunity.
Right. Okay. So the pigs would just eat the truffles.
Right.
And then they go, oh fuck, we just lost $1,000. So the dogs are much more manageable. They don't eat them. They just find them.
Yes.
So that, but again, we did not learn that from the film.
No.
They do a bit of business about showing sort of the darker side, like the black market side.
Yes. And the commercial side.
A little bit of selling truffles and that, I think a lot of it came down to, there's a lot of secrecy about like where you hunt for truffles. It's very competitive
A lot
these
of them
days.
go at night,
There's
so people can't find them.
Yes, there's a lot of money at stake. And I do think, I don't know if I'm right, but I do think that potentially these filmmakers did not speak Italian.
I think you're right.
So it felt separated. It felt like they wanted an intimate portrait behind the curtain of how these truffle hunters go, but they didn't get it.
Yeah, I think because they weren't able to communicate well enough, that they ended up being observational, but the setup of the filmmaking was not.
It was odd.
So yeah. And the film never had a point of view about anything.
No.
And then to really complicate things, I think my biggest issue with it.
Well, trigger warning.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the film.
Yeah. So throughout a large portion of the film, the truffle hunters are talking about how people will come and lay poison traps to kill the dogs because the dogs are so valuable in helping, and it's so competitive in trying to find the truffles. And at first it kind of seems like a thing like, ooh, gosh, we heard a wives' tale.
Like it could be like, ooh, one time it happened and maybe, we're worried, but,
And then it happens in the film.
I mean, you don't literally see the dog die, but the dog does die, and it's
And he talks about
horrible.
how this is his second dog to be poisoned.
Yes.
And I mean, he has an emotional moment, but then the film doesn't handle it where they immediately cut away from it.
Oh, it was very weird. So he's filing a police report for his dead dog. He's very upset. He's crying. And then it dead cuts to him playing drums, which we'd seen earlier, very loudly. And I guess it was trying to be like, this is his therapy working it out.
Sure.
But then they cut from that to him crying again
over
about
the grave of the dog.
And it was handled in a way that I did not appreciate.
No.
And then it cuts to this sort of Godfather-esque, like cliched fat Italian man ordering this plate and just,
shaving all the
truffles onto it.
That's good,
Oh,
yes.
the truffles. And at this point I was like, oh, so this is the end of the film. It's going to be like, so fuck this. The system's broken. Like it was going to make some kind of statement like, yeah, eat that fucking truffle. The dog's blood is on your hands, essentially. But that's not really what happened. And then it kept going for a while and meandered to the end. And it was handled in a way I did not appreciate.
No, it was weird.
Yeah.
I overall enjoyed parts of it, but didn't find it to be a particularly successful film.
No. And I liked the look of it, but it was very slow.
Yeah.
So, and I don't feel like I learned anything.
No, not really.
It's a bummer.
I know, I'm bummed.
But like, go Google truffles. I mean, I feel kind of bad at this point about the truffles.
Well, I don't think that's
the case everywhere.
No, when I remember in the Wikipedia article, I was reading about how like a lot of people since like
had truffle groves.
Yeah, like since like the late 1800s,
right.
They've been able to cultivate truffles in groves with oak trees and whatever.
Right.
So I think that not necessarily everywhere has this issue. Like the commercial truffle that you're getting might not be that issue.
Right. Because it was upsetting.
But maybe some of these restaurants, particularly with like the Alba truffle that's more, I don't know if they've cultivated that
rarer or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
And so then that's the problem.
I mean, I guess you could say it inspired us to Google a shit ton of stuff about truffles. But,
sure,
but yeah, it was not informative.
No.
So anyway.
Yeah. To shift gears quite a bit.
Drastically.
Although still in the Alps. So not that different. That was a great transition on my part.
Yeah, nailed it.
We watched a movie called Downhill, featuring Featuring.
Have some more wine, Andrew.
Okay, well. Featuring Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Will Ferrell. And it's based off of a Swedish movie that came out in 2014 called Force Majeure, which I have seen.
And I have not.
Avaryl has not. I don't really want to give a lot away because I feel like you went in not knowing anything, right?
I went in not knowing anything, but for some reason, I thought it was going to get crazier and darker. I don't know why, but I had this feeling, maybe because you said it was like this Swedish dark comedy, that I was like, oh fuck, it's gonna get weird and dark.
It's not that dark.
No, it's tough because I think it's a hard sell with Will Ferrell, who I love. He's very talented. He's so funny. He can be dramatic, but I think a lot of people are gonna go. I've overheard on the shuttles here and stuff, people be like, oh, I saw Downhill. Yeah, it wasn't like funny like I thought it would be because Will Ferrell. I mean, and that's his cross to bear.
Well, I mean, I liked what was the one where he was a writer with Emma Thompson?
Stranger Than Fiction. You know that will happen with whenever Will Ferrell tries to break out of this broad comedy mold. But I think it will be a problem for them marketing wise, particularly since Julia Louis-Dreyfus stole the whole movie.
She absolutely.
I mean, she was
outperforms
100% the best part of the movie.
What I will say, it was interesting for me because I liked Force Majeure, and I when I heard that this was coming out, I was kind of like, well, I don't really care. I don't need to see it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I do like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, so I guess, let's see it. I didn't dislike the movie at all.
I didn't at all.
After seeing it, though, was kind of just like, well, they didn't really add anything that
was particularly groundbreaking compared
to, I don't see why this movie needed to be remade.
Right.
Aside from that it's English language now. And they thought maybe that'd be more commercial.
And they got stars.
And they got, maybe I don't know. They wanted a ski vacation. I'm not sure.
Right.
She was great. She definitely was my favorite part of the remake.
Yes.
And my favorite part of I got to see her in this role, which I thought she was really good in.
Really good in.
Yeah.
We haven't really said anything about it.
No, so it's about a family that goes on a ski vacation to Austria. And something happens that tests their familial bond, let's say.
Yes.
Being vague.
It sort of starts I was going to say the wrong word that was going to give something away. Gets the ball rolling, let's say, on problems that they haven't been addressing.
Sure, yes.
And I actually am really interested to watch Force Majeure because I feel like knowing the basic story now, it requires so much subtlety of filmmaking and nuance, and I don't think this movie had that.
Well, we didn't talk about this. So it's directed by people that I forget.
You don't know their names. Why are you bringing this up?
Because I know that what they're
Jim
from.
Rash and
the principal or the dean rather from Community, and the other guy I just know his face, but I don't know what he's from.
Yep.
Two comedians, two men, directing a movie that I was interested. I mean, the Swedish one's also directed by a man.
Yeah.
But for me,
he wrote it too.
Right. Yes, that's true. And I would be interested to see a female take on this. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, now that I think about it, the story is about Will Ferrell's character.
Yes. And yet the female characters are the most interesting part of the movie.
Absolutely.
The concierge woman.
Oh my God.
Fabulous.
She was great. There's a lot of fun in this movie. I think this one is more fun than the Swedish one. I think that was intentional.
Yeah. I would say it's worth watching.
Yes.
I wasn't blown away.
No.
But it was fun. The performances were fun. It's a fun time at the movies. And not fun. It was. You don't leave the movie going, oh boy,
no,
that was
true.
a lot.
That's
it's
true.
not heavy.
No, not really.
It's just not like a laugh out loud broad comedy.
I
Even though there are
loud.
parts that are funny.
Sure.
But it's not that.
Yeah,
there are
right.
other things going on.
It's not old school.
It's not old school.
So it's funny, one of the things that we were thinking about or realizing this year, and I don't know if maybe it's been like this all the time, but we haven't noticed it. But while we were sitting in the theater waiting for the movie to start, the music would be themed to the movie.
Yes.
I mean, at least roughly themed,
yes,
I would say. Particularly ones that had more of a musical element or that were easier to theme off of.
Right.
They were more evident.
It seems like somebody put together
some Spotify playlists
specifically for the program.
But then I also would love if they had published that. Maybe they have and I haven't. Yeah, because I thought that would be a fun integration, particularly with Spotify or something. If there was I don't think they're a sponsor.
Oh no,
but if they were, or Apple Music or whatever, who wanted to do
fun.
it. But I think that'd be really cool to have playlists for each movie that someone thought of and put together.
Yes.
So for instance, one of them, we were in a movie last night called Palm Springs.
Yes.
That is a rom-com, takes place at a wedding in Palm Springs. And so we're sitting there and, one of the gay volunteers in the aisles is just dancing it up to I Want to Dance with Somebody and like, yes, Whitney Houston, live your life. And
then Don't Stop Believin' comes on. And it was all these sort of, I realized later, like, oh, these are all songs that people play at weddings.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
And there was a different film we watched, we'll talk about in a minute, that was all about jazz in the 50s. And they played all this jazz from the 50s before it. I'm into this idea. I think it's fun.
I think it's really fun.
Oh, and before Truffle Hunters, they were playing Italian
music. Yeah, it was
music.
Italian music, remember?
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Before, and then we danced, it was all ballet. It was more ballet than it was like Georgian music. But
it was classical music,
sure,
let's say.
Sure. Well, so let's go back and we'll talk about Palm Springs. So speaking of records, this broke a record for $17.5 million and 69 cents.
Oh, so funny.
It really tickled me.
So funny.
Well, and then I was reading the press release and they were like, well, it cost us $85 million to make. So, we took a bath on this. I mean, it was a joke. It didn't actually cost them $85 million.
I was like, wait, what?
What rom-com cost $85 million?
Yes, I was like, what?
No, so they're like, Neon on Hulu really got a steal because our wives are going to ask us a lot of questions on this.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I love it. That's so fun and kind of a fuck you to the
they're kind of taking the piss out of the whole thing.
Taking the piss out of the whole thing.
It is interesting. I also saw like a headline. I didn't have a chance to read the article yet, but it was about how there's more commercial movies coming into the indie space of Sundance.
It does, this year particularly.
And I think it's because the streaming space has shifted things so much. Mm-hmm. And whatever that, like some of these markets, and also that the theatrical space is now just fucking Disney and Fox with tentpoles. They're like, okay, well, we own everything, so it's only going to be these $300 million movies.
Right.
That's a franchise that you've already seen. We're rebooting it for the 6th time.
Yeah.
Whatever. So there needs a different outlet for these kind of movies.
It is all shifting.
Yeah. But so Palm Springs is a rom-com, which obviously Avaryl and I are both big fans of the genre.
Yes.
The genre. But
it's the new Lonely Island. I mean, they produced it.
Yes.
Andy Samberg is the star.
Yep.
I honestly don't want to give too much away.
No.
I really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. I laughed a lot. My jaw was hurting. I was laughing so much.
I laughed a lot. I was surprised.
Yes.
I think going into it blind was a great idea.
Yeah. I would say just see it.
Just go see it. The cast is great. Like, people kept showing up. I was like, oh, I know them from something that I really liked them in. Sure. It was always like, oh, them. They're great.
And they weren't even a lot of like big name comedians.
No. Just like people that I've been tracking that I'm like, that's a person I've enjoyed in something else. I like them. They're great in this.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I like that. That's good. But yeah, honestly, I don't want to say much about it except that, yeah, it's a rom-com. It's a little different.
Yeah. I think we should probably do a spoilers review of it
later
when it comes out. But I don't want to really talk about it too much, except for it's fun, funny. And I guess what I'll say too that I was thinking, I've watched a bunch of like the new Netflix ones, and a lot of them are good. They're fun enough.
Well, rom-coms are making a comeback. We've been clamoring for long enough.
That's what I'm saying. I was about to say, I'm like so glad that rom-coms are finally having a comeback.
Yes.
And thank you Netflix for doing that.
Yeah.
However, I thought that this was much more successful than
thank
pretty
you
much
Netflix and Hallmark and Lifetime.
Well,
I feel like they helped a little bit.
Those are more like.
But they helped a little bit.
Romance and whatever.
But it was like there was money that was helpful.
Sure. There was an obvious audience that was being underserved.
Yes. No, I thought this was one of the top tier, much better than the average rom-coms.
Yeah, I don't remember enjoying a rom-com this much since the Rebel Wilson one.
Isn't it romantic? Yeah.
And it kind of has like a similar vibe of like silliness and
meta-ness.
Yeah.
I will say it felt a little bit like junk food. Where
absolutely
it was so fun and funny and everything, but don't think about it too hard.
Sure, no, it is. The junk food's a perfect.
Yes,
but I love that sometimes where you just want to put something on.
I just want to see Diane Lane stare at her electrocuted washer dryer. As it explodes,
it gets me every time.
It's so good. So stupid. So sometimes that's what you want.
Yeah.
And so I would highly recommend it.
And there were definitely scenes in this. I mean, not that were like, what the fuck is going on?
I mean,
there were definitely scenes that were like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah.
But, it must be the shrooms. These are good shrooms. There were other scenes, too, where I was just cackling.
Yes.
And it was just because it's silly and fun, and I like that.
And the leads were very charismatic and had chemistry.
I thought they had great chemistry.
It's the woman, oh God, I'm going to forget her name, but she's the mother from How I Met Your Mother. Her name is, I want to say, like, Christine Melione.
It's something almost close to...
Something very close
Camille?
No, that was the sister.
Oh, that was
Camille
the sister.
Mendes was the sister.
That's right.
It's Christine Millie.
Yep.
It's almost Christopher Maloney.
Okay.
But a female version of that name.
Great. She was great. I actually really liked her.
She's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, highly recommend.
Well, speaking about sort of meta genre, I feel like that's really coming into its own now. Like we're going to deconstruct genre and all this stuff and be sort of self-aware and like all...
I like the meta-ness of that there's now a genre of
about
meta-genre.
Meta-genre.
Yeah.
It is true. I wonder when we're going to switch over. It's going to become earnest again. I don't know.
I mean, it'll happen.
It'll happen. But we saw this film called Scare Me, which will be out on Shudder soon.
Oh, right.
And it's a very meta horror comedy.
See, meta again.
Meta.
It was definitely a horror comedy.
Yes.
It's not scary, really, at all, actually.
I was affected by the ending. I wouldn't say I couldn't sleep at night.
Oh, totally.
But I was affected by the ending.
It definitely shifts gears for a long time. It's not scary, and then it's like, oh, wait, this got real.
Yes. So, again, I don't want to spoil too much of
No.
it, but essentially it stars Aya Cash, who's the woman from You're the Worst, this TV show that you don't want. And, oh boy, I forgot the name. Josh Rubin.
Oh, yeah.
Was that his name?
I think so.
I think it's Josh Rubin. Wrote, directed, and starred in it.
Wow. I didn't realize he wrote it.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's essentially two writers that have both decided they're going to go to these remote cabins in the Catskills and get away from it all and write.
Right.
And one of them is Aya Cash, who's this very successful author, and she's living her best life. She's on this up trajectory.
Yeah.
And the other one is Josh Rubin. He's sort of failed at everything he's tried and is kind of...
at a rough point
in his life. And they decide over the course of a stormy night when the power is out to tell each other scary stories. They're both horror writers, to tell each other scary stories and who can scare each other the most and reference this or is this original, and it's all of those conversations. And it was sort of a study on sort of the basicness of white males.
That seems to be the theme of Sundance this year.
It does.
Is that like toxic masculinity and white privilege is going to murder us all.
Yes. So
or at least ourselves.
Yes. So I would say I actually really enjoyed it.
I
would
too.
Highly recommend it. I thought the performances were really fun, and it was a different take. And don't go into it thinking it's going to be like super scary horror movie.
No.
But it's the kind of movie we like.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. I would say it's
the kind of horror for Andrew.
For me.
Yes.
In a different way, like obviously like Hereditary or something like that is more... Well, I don't even know how
disturbing.
Yeah, that was definitely more disturbing.
I would say.
Yes. And then there's certain horror movies where it's more like psychological.
Yes.
Part of this movie later on gets a little more psychological, and that's when it really kind of got scarier.
Yes.
But for the most part, it's funny.
Oh, yeah. And I want to shout out the sound design.
Oh, my God.
Because it was a really interesting idea. So the movie basically takes place essentially in one location.
Yep, in a cabin.
And it's them telling scary stories. And they use sound design and very little special effects to have their stories come alive, let's say.
Exactly.
And it was very effective and really good. So I would actually really recommend it. I liked it a lot.
I liked it a lot,
At first, I won't spoil the ending. At first, when it ended, I went, and the more I kind of thought about it and really went into it, I went, oh, actually, you know what? I kind of like the ending.
Yeah, I left and I was like, oh, the ending left me disappointed for how much fun and whatever, how much I was liking it. And then the more you think about it, you can certainly justify the end. I don't know if it's exactly what I would have picked.
Yeah, it wasn't perfectly satisfying, but I liked it more than I initially did. So I'd recommend it.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that note of horror comedies, I've seen one that Avryl's going to see tonight at midnight, and I'm very excited, called Bad Hair. And, I mean, this checks a lot of boxes for us. It's a period piece.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's
80s?
1989. So late 80s. Campy, referential, horror comedy about a woman who's trying to make it big. She's an African-American woman in the late 80s trying to make it in this, like, MTV-esque channel.
Like as a VJ?
She wants to be a host.
Okay.
Like, I mean, MTV doesn't exist in this movie.
In this space, okay.
In the world. But this is essentially the MTV of the world.
Great.
And she works for a company called Culture.
Okay.
Where it's like African American focused. Basically, BET, MTV combined into a fun, fabulous chain.
Well, don't tell me too much.
Okay, I won't. I mean, I won't tell you too much. She feels like in order to succeed more, she has to get a weave.
Okay.
That she can't be wearing her natural hair.
Okay.
So she finally does, but it turns out the weave, something's off.
Oh, is it like How to Succeed in Advertising or whatever? You haven't seen that movie.
I haven't. But there's a lot of references. I'm sure Avaryl will get 10 times more than I did. But even then, I still got a lot of the references.
Cool.
Justin Simien wrote and directed it. He did Dear White People.
Yes.
I didn't love Dear White People. This, I thought, did a much more successful job of getting a lot of the points across and like the cultural dialogue of like, let's bring up these conversations in a fun and funny way that was really smart.
More accessible. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. I'm excited to
and
see it.
I haven't even talked about Vanessa Hudgens. Or Vanessa Hudgens. Where did that come from?
Vanessa Williams.
Much better actress, much more fabulous. Facts are facts, I'm sorry. She knew exactly what movie she was in, and I really enjoyed it.
I love her. She's great.
Yeah, she is great. So I'm excited. Once you see it, we'll talk about it some more.
Okay, we'll go more in depth.
Yes. Should we talk about when we ran into Hillary Clinton?
Well,
I wish we did.
That's an overreach. We saw her.
We saw her in the same restaurant, and I pretended like I was going to go to the bathroom and couldn't find where it was so that I could see her. And then she walked out, and people clapped.
She left the restaurant, said nothing, did nothing.
No.
I mean, except was herself, and everyone just...
Yeah.
Yay!
Oh. This is silly. Because she had a documentary here that is actually a docu-series on Hulu.
It's 3 hours?
4 hours long.
4 hours.
So I was like, it was funny because people were like, oh, I want to go see the Hillary thing. I'll go. And it's like, well, it's 4 hours long. You realize.
In one sitting.
Exactly.
And everyone that I heard was like, oh, we were going to go. But then we heard it was 4 hours long.
I'll watch it on Hulu. Thanks. But I'm intrigued, although I don't know if I actually have it within me right now to watch it. But maybe I'll watch The Glorias again and then watch Hillary.
Or watch Hillary and then The Glorias.
There you go.
I think that's better.
That's the better. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So another movie that we saw, because we saw that Tessa Thompson was in it and immediately said, yes,
let's
go.
Yeah.
Was called Sylvie's Love.
Yeah.
It's basically if Douglas Sirk with a little less fabulosity.
Sure.
You know, like a little less nobody can do Douglas Sirk like Douglas Sirk, right? But if Douglas Sirk made a movie in the 50s, but with an all African-American cast.
Yes.
Essentially is how we would describe it.
It's a romance. I thought you said it really well. It's kind of like The Notebook without all the melodrama and the Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
But Tessa Thompson in the Q&A, which we posted, she talks about how they wanted to kind of create this fantasy world of... the director was saying to them, like, you know, if you took a picture of an African-American woman from the 50s and 60s and her child or whatever, and maybe in the corner it says, you know, no colors allowed or something, you know, that...
Separate but equal. Something
like that,
yes.
that represented the struggles of the time. If you were to just crop that out and zoom in on this woman and her child and find out what her story was.
What was their day like?
Exactly.
You know?
Let's explore that and not have it, and just have a romance for this story and for these people. And she, I thought, also said really eloquently, I mean, she's amazing. I'm obsessed with her. But
the skirt she was wearing.
Oh my God.
Was everything. It looked like the Sydney Opera House. It was
fabulous. Great. It was great. Love her. But she had a really good point of like, and I think this also goes along with gay movies, which we'll talk about, but like so many of them are, you know, at least they used to be focused on either coming out or AIDS.
Or like hate crimes.
Sure. Yes.
You know, just like
tragedy of like, oh, and then
yeah.
And now we're finally starting to get more movies that are about just like, oh, and then he's gay. Or like I remember we were talking about in the TV episode of our podcast, you were talking about the oh my God, why can't I think of Alan Cumming. I kept wanting to say Carr. Also fabulous, but not different.
Oh, Alan Cumming on Instinct, which I unfortunately I think at this point has been canceled.
Oh, well.
But yes, he's just on a CBS procedural and he's gay. I mean, yes, it's part of the story, but it's not the story.
Right. And so, like, their race didn't really play any part of the story, per se.
It didn't. It wasn't, it was, the romance was the forefront.
Yes.
And of course the race comes up and they talk, there is some strife and they talk about, oh, this person was racist or whatever. Like it exists.
Absolutely.
It doesn't ignore that it happened.
But
that's
not the point.
I mean, it's not as lighthearted, but it's sort of like as if like Doris Day and Rock Hudson, if they made like a Harry Belafonte, like Dorothy Dandridge, like rom-com.
Sure.
This is more dramatic than that.
Yes.
But it was like a fantasy where that could be.
This is like a story of, timing and obligations and what society expects from us and what we really want, our heart desires and true love. And it was sweet. It was a little long. It was a little slow, but I really liked it.
I would say, I think because they were trying to make such sort of just a nice, normal, quote unquote, movie. There wasn't a lot of drama. There wasn't a lot of
conflict,
emotion. It was very subdued, which is also interesting.
Sure.
It was just lovely and a little tense and a little but nothing was heartbreaking. Nothing was like, oh my God, I'm feeling everything.
No.
It's probably a better movie, because it's less melodramatic.
Well, sure.
But it wasn't as impactful.
It kind of, at a certain point, I remember thinking like, oh, it's kind of like what we love about like a Jane Austen-esque type movie where there's like a lot of glances and, oh, we can't be together or can we, like whatever.
Right.
It has some of those vibes. I mean, it's not Jane Austen-esque really in any way, but aside from that, I guess, where you're like,
it was interesting.
Long.
It was interesting where the male lead in a romance had no agency.
I mean, not no agency, but
he was very much dragged along throughout the story. Like, he didn't really make any decisions. Everything was like, he never stood up for himself. He never empowered himself. And it was interesting because she did. And that's so the opposite of what we usually see.
That's true.
And she picked her career.
Yep.
And she succeeded in all these things where usually women, I'm a single woman, I can't be working, or her sort of let's say the James Marsden character of the movie, like the person she's with but shouldn't be, isn't the one. At a certain point is like, well, we said you could have a job if it didn't interfere with our lives. And at that point in the movie, I'm like, oh great, she's gonna quit and just become a a sad. I didn't fulfill my. And then she's like, nah, bitch, I'm gonna take care of it. So I thought this was very unique and refreshing and lovely, and the costumes were great, and the look was great, and the music was great.
Oh, the music was great.
It could have been a little more
pizzazzy,
dramatic.
Sure.
For my taste.
Can we talk real quick about her accent work?
What about it?
Whatever do you mean?
Oh, affectation.
It was an affectation more than an accent, I guess.
She went into a little bit of Judy every once in a while.
Every once in a while, it was a little Judy.
Oh, what do you mean, Robert? Oh my God.
Exactly. I mean, it was interesting because there was this whole storyline of like her mom was an etiquette teacher, and so there was a whole thing of like how she has to be
proper, marry the right kind of guy.
And I think that proper etiquette-ness was supposed to be represented in her accent or her affectation. Yeah. But it was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And slightly distracting, but mostly just kind of fun.
I think distracting just because you were like, "Ooh, Judy's here."
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, yeah. It was silly.
But I would actually really recommend it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was just,
I did too.
It's not going to have you sobbing.
No, which is fine.
And that's fine.
But it also was nice. It was heartwarming, actually.
Yes.
And it was a sweet romance, not a rom-com, but a romance.
A drama romance.
Yeah, with a unique angle that I haven't seen and would love to see more of.
Yes.
So that was nice.
And Tessa Thompson.
I think she is like, well, first of all, she's fabulously on Fabulous.
Oh, what now?
She's
obviously on Fabulous Cunt Island.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. Oh, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously.
So one last movie to talk about. It was called And Then We Danced, which premiered at Cannes. I remember reading the titles about, like the headlines about it now, and I didn't realize that was the movie that we were going.
So we read the blurb, and it was
two dancers have a budding romance, and there's concerns that it'll affect their dancing careers because they're in Georgia. It's filmed in Georgia.
Did they film it in Georgia?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Parts of it.
Maybe parts of it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if all of it was filmed there.
Okay.
The director was saying that he was inspired to make it after, in 2013, I think he said, 50 people in Georgia tried to have a gay pride rally and a gay pride parade, and 20,000 people came out to protest it.
Yes.
And it like got ugly, and it was sad.
Yes.
And so he wanted to create something that was a way to introduce people to the idea of that there's a gay person in every family, or
well, he said a lot of the prejudice in Georgia against homosexuals and LGBT, all of the above, is because they've never, quote unquote, met someone, right? They've never met an out person, maybe.
Right.
And how a lot of it's just by default.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just built in kind of thing. And how he wanted to show that they're real people and that they have feelings, all of that stuff and all of the above.
So the blurb was like, oh, unlike a lot of, of LGBT stories, this one is not about coming out and not about AIDS and death.
And hate crimes.
And it's, hopeful and joyous and whatever. And I disagree with that blurb a little bit. I think it is about coming out.
Yes, but not in that dramatic, cliched way. I think joyous is the wrong word. I would say hopeful and, not overtly depressing.
It's certainly not overtly depressing. It is very much a romance between two men that are discovering themselves and their feelings, and dealing with societal pressures, both poverty, homophobia, family requirements and illness, etc. There's a lot going on that's keeping them apart. It reminds me, there's a few different. I mean, there's always.
Well, I was gonna say this is what I wanted Call Me by Your Name to be.
Oh.
I much preferred this.
I definitely preferred this personally to Call Me by Your Name. Very different.
This is what I wanted from that movie, from Call Me by Your Name.
Sure.
I felt more emotion.
Yep. More chemistry.
They showed the gay sex.
That's true.
I mean, it wasn't shying away from it.
Right.
And I thought the lead was absolutely fantastic. He sort of looks like a very thin, young Martin Short in the best way. He had a very dramatic face.
He did.
And he had the red hair. It was...
For me, it was like if you were to cross Eddie Redmayne and Tom Holland.
Tom Holland is just, cute.
Well, but I mean, the Tom Hollandness was more of his mannerisms and the dancerness.
Okay, great.
Because Tom Holland is a ballet dancer.
Okay, but not his face.
Not necessarily his face. A little bit, though. I got that kind of cute, twinky gay boy. And then there was also the Eddie Redmayne-ness of the red hair, obviously, but also the more severe features. Eddie Redmayne has that kind of more angular.
Either way.
Yeah.
He was fantastic.
He was great.
He showed so much expression in his face.
Yeah.
And that comes from dancing. He's a dancer and then...
He was found on Instagram.
Turned actor. It's in Georgian. It's in a second language. And so he showed so much without saying anything.
Sure.
And I thought that was so effective, where I didn't get those feelings as much in Call Me by Your Name. I was left, not that we have to compare them, but they are similar. And I was left in Call Me by Your Name being a lot of times being I'm not sure what you're conveying.
Sure.
Mostly from Armie Hammer, let's be honest.
Yes.
But I just thought the chemistry was so good. I just really loved them.
Sure. I mean, they're similar in the sense that it's a fleeting romance of people coming to terms with their sexuality, and then in the end they don't end up together. Sure.
But against the similar, they couldn't be together because of society kind of things.
But in Call Me by Your Name, that's not really the case.
But that's why I think it was that it failed.
Well, sure.
I thought it doesn't matter. I thought this movie was better and more effective.
Yes. This reminds me of there's a bunch of movies like this, but there's one that's Israeli called Yossi and Jagger or Yager. I don't know how it's pronounced. They're in the military in Israel. And they fall in love, and then it's they have to move on after they're out of their stint serving. Because you know how in Israel every civilian has to serve in the military for a period of time. So they that's where they meet and fall in love and realize. But then it's kind of now that we're out, it's
you
great.
Haven't told me about this.
I haven't.
No,
it's really good. I love these movies because they are powerful and moving and
refreshing.
I don't find it refreshing. I find it depressing. I found this movie to be depressing in the sense that they couldn't be together. The fact that it's not really a spoiler alert, but he comes out to his brother in the end, and his brother's reaction is, you have to leave this country, your home, with your family, because otherwise you will have nowhere to go and you will be miserable and or murdered. That's not
refreshing's
hopeful.
The wrong word, but it wasn't. It didn't go to a super dark, fucked up place.
No.
Which
no one died.
I guess is not great.
It's just not great.
We shouldn't be yay, no one was murdered in a hate crime or got AIDS, or you're right. But I did really like this movie.
I really liked it. It's just, I think for me, the blurb misled me to the point where I was hoping that it would be something
more
different.
Like Sylvie's Love, where it was and it was nice.
Yes, and it was nice, and it wasn't that. Oh, and then they found each other and they found love. On the dance floor,
I love that.
Sure. I mean, I love that Robin was in this though, and
oh my God, there's an impromptu Robin music video where he puts on this huge poofed hat and dancing to Honey, and I was like,
Yeah.
I love it. And they play
a
ABBA.
very sexy number. It was like sexual.
Oh yeah. Well, and they, like I said, they had a ton of chemistry. I thought.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So.
And the other guy was cute.
The lover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were good dancers.
Unfortunately, the lover and the brother looked a lot alike.
A little too similar. Yeah.
So I kept being like, and they were all dancing. Like they were all.
They were all dancing
in the
together.
dance
Yeah. So it's hard to.
But we get to see a peek into like traditional Georgian dancing, which I had no idea about. It did make me laugh. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler, but essentially it ends in its flash dance. I mean, he's like, I'm gonna dance for me.
Well,
and I was like, yes, where's the lady blowing her nose? I love it. But it was silly.
I mean, I did like that. I agree. And I liked that. I think that was the hopefulness.
I guess what I'd say is this. It's refreshing and hopeful for Georgia.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, right. I guess for me,
like,
it was just like, well, Jesus, there's still countries where it's like, oh,
right.
You have to leave in order to be yourself.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think that was the hopeful part where he was like, you know what? I am going to dance my way, and I am going to get out of here.
I'm going to get out of here.
And I can still dance and be me, but I can do it somewhere that'll appreciate it.
And they showed both sides, like I guess we shouldn't spoil it, but let's say his lover doesn't make the same choice.
Right.
But it was really interesting. So the director and the lead actor were there, and they talked about how much adversity this movie faced in Georgia.
Oh, right.
They had 3 days of screenings where they sold 6,000 tickets, but
sold
they
out
had
in
to
minutes.
have armed guards, and there was huge protests. And people wanted to see it, but they couldn't, and it was so upsetting.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think that this is one of those movies, in particular in these countries, where the internet is so amazing to have.
Yes.
Where there's so many other ways. Because imagine, I mean, it probably wouldn't have been made or released at all 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
But the fact that now it can also be made and released in the rest of the world and online, and then anyone can watch it. And I think that'll help progress this a lot further.
Yes. Well, and the director said that they basically had forced the Georgian government to take a stand.
Sure.
They were like, this is...
Right, because it's legal. It's been legal, at least to be gay, which, I mean, yikes. But, like, in Georgia since like 2002, I think
11,
he said.
I think he said.
Oh, maybe. Either way, for a
time.
period of years. But that it was kind of just like a cursory, like, to get into the EU
we're
and whatever.
Cool,
yeah.
But we're not, enforcing this.
No, exactly. So I think... Yeah, they had to officially recognize the law and be like, yeah, this is...
Right, and like they sort of held a mirror up to them and be like, look, you need to actually do something about this. I really liked this movie. I thought the performances were great. Yeah. I liked the characters. I found them all interesting. I felt like I understood them.
Yes.
And
I
would
really well
recommend
done.
it.
Absolutely.
But I would not use the word joyous.
No, I would not.
That was a mistake.
That was the big thing for me. I just went in with the wrong expectations, and I still really enjoyed it. I was just like, oh, well, that was... not joyous.
I think the second it started, I was like, oh, this will not be joyous. But I'm really into what's happening.
Yeah. Well, so cheers. I'm out of wine, so we have to go up to the party and get some more.
I gotta work on this.
Oh, my God.
We're going to be seeing a few more movies before we leave, so we might do more reviews on those. But thanks for joining. Make sure to subscribe, rate and review us on iTunes. It really helps.
Yes.
And we love to read them and see what everyone has to say. And cheers to
Yeah.
Sundance. Very exciting.
Boop.